Welcome to the datacenterHawk podcast. Data centers are a fast-moving, complex, and expensive real estate asset class. At datacenterHawk, we provide data center real estate intelligence information globally through our platform and experienced team to help you make better decisions around data center real estate. Well, I'm Mike Netzer, joined as always by David Liggitt. Welcome.
Hello.
This is our PTC recap pod. PTC, for those of you who don't know,
you can call that,
is the Pacific Telecommunications Council, which is a conference that's been going on for probably 30 plus years.
Yeah, sounds right.
It happens to be in Hawaii.
That's right.
I know. We get a lot of flack for that over our team having to go there every year. Yes. Great conference. So a couple of things about PTC. One, it's growing. I think experientially we all saw it's much busier this year than it even was last year. What I heard was it was 30% attendance jump.
That's right.
From last year to this year. And the second thing is every year they publish, when you register for the conference, you tell what your kind of primary interest is. That's how they define it. So last year, primary interest in data center was 29%.
I didn't know this.
Yes.
Okay.
This year it was 48.
Oh, wow.
So not only is the total number of people attending, the people that are attending specifically because they're interested in data centers went up. And
Sure.
so I think we felt that it was a crazy week.
Yeah.
So let's talk about kind of your thoughts on PTC generally.
Well, first, if you're planning a vacation with your family, don't come
to Honolulu.
Don't come to Honolulu, January, whatever. I don't know what the dates are, but I always, people that are there with their families, I'm always like, oh, I'm so sorry. Well, number one, it was, we had so many great meetings, with data center providers, investors, users, vendors. I mean, just it's really interesting to hear the different perspectives that we're seeing in the space today. The shift in approach related to, data center design, data center campuses, the size of things that are happening today. I mean, it's been just a massive change over the last, 3-4 years. And so whenever you get to be around people that are experiencing that and working through it and just sharing ideas, it was great. And, time well spent for our team. I know we had, we brought in our global team. And so we had more meetings than we could keep up with, which is, sometimes you're a little bummed that you can't meet with everybody, but it was a great time. So,
yeah, that was probably one of the regrets coming out of there was I looked at my list and I was like, man, there's 20, 30 people I wish I could touch base with and get to. It's funny. We look back at you went there first in 2020.
Yeah, 2020. And, there's probably, I think when people go out there for the first time, you're really not, you kind of have to understand how this works and, what hotels people stay at and, how to get from different places logistically if you're going to meet with a lot of people. But yeah, now the way things have shifted in our space and in our, our company too, it's been fun to watch the people that we interact with, and the list is long now. So
fun fact, the Hilton Village where the conference is at is a number of different towers, Rainbow, Tapa, whatever. The one we stay in is called we always call it the Ali Tower. It's ALI apostrophe
give me
I.
the
so
correct pronunciation.
So on the tail end of the conference, Veronica and I went over to Kauai and stayed on Kauai.
Yep.
So there's this app you can download. It's awesome. And it's this guy who narrates. So you say, I'm going to be here, and you play it, and it's GPS follows you around wherever you're driving.
Yep.
And he's got all these little commentary basically.
Yes.
It's hey, if you pull off here, it's about a 10-minute drive. You can see this waterfall. It's really cool. But then in between the little stops, he gives you a history lesson basically.
Okay.
So what I learned is the Ali'i, it's a 3-syllable word, were the chiefs of the different Hawaiian islands. So the Ali'i Tower that we stayed in is named after chiefs. So it's the Chief Tower.
Oh.
So there you go.
Okay. Well,
impress your friends.
Yeah.
Impress your friends.
Go Kansas City Chiefs.
Whoa. You just lost, I don't know, half our listeners. I don't know.
Whatever.
We're probably all
I'm a Cowboy fan, unfortunately. So
yeah,
I'm not rooting for the Eagles. I'm proud of that.
Yeah. One of the fun things about PTC is you get, in addition to just kind of the meetings and the business that's going on, you get to hear kind of all the different people's reactions to the news. So there's that announcement about kind of unlocking some government land for data center development. Yep. And I think there was, I'd say less than enthusiastic reception about that announcement, which is fine. But some of the other announcements that came out just in the last week was this kind of $500 billion to be invested over the next 4 years, specifically to support AI infrastructure.
Yep.
And then it was kind of immediately following that an announcement about kind of some new AI technology that could be extremely disruptive.
Yeah, sure.
What are your thoughts on that, and what you heard from other folks at the conference? Their reaction to that.
Yeah, in our space today, it's actually hard to keep up at times because of the velocity of things that are being communicated. And I think all of us should take a step back and go, hey, what's real and what's not? But, I think the thing this week that really shifted in our space was, the announcement of this new technology with AI and DeepSeek that I think was announced yesterday or the day before. And so I think the industry is really working right now to figure out, hey, what does this mean today? What does this mean in a year, 3 years, 5 years for the space? And so, a couple of things I would say. I mean, the first thing is you can just see the innovation that's taking place now and how quickly. I think before the development in the U.S., was based on the amount of chips needed to get these AI models to do what they needed to do, and apparently the model that's been produced is different than that, and so and more efficient. That's what it appears to be. So how that impacts things. I mean, I think look at it from a supply, demand, pricing trends. That's kind of how I think about the market. Right now we're seeing a lot of supply being talked about. So I think, and this kind of goes back to one of the things I was talking about on LinkedIn the other day, which we'll get to. But, we've tracked the market now, and we're just jumping in, but we've tracked the market now for, 10 years at DatacenterHawk. Before I was at CB for 8 years, so almost 20 years. And the box of our industry was pretty set. You'd have some new entrants here or there, but, it didn't shift a lot for different reasons. Now that box has grown, and you have a lot of people that are really trying to figure out, hey, how can I play in the data center space? It's growing. Utility power is a challenge everywhere. Okay, how can I come in and play? And so I actually was writing down just the announcements last week of developments that are supposedly coming in the data center space. I'd like to read a few if that's okay.
Please do.
Yes. And I'm just going to go through this list, but there's a nuclear plant in Iowa that's now being looked at from a data center perspective. There's a gas-fired power plant in Loudoun County that's been purchased for data center development. There's apparently a multi-gigawatt data center park that's going to go outside of DFW, 400 megawatts in Phoenix at a new campus that will be developed in Pennsylvania, Mike, 15 building, 1,280 acre data center campus. In Ohio, 590 acres for data center development was purchased. Let's see, I have
this
one.
This is in the last week.
Yeah. Last week, $1 billion secured for financing of a Maryland data center campus. So it's just here's a gigawatt campus in Northern Virginia, a 400 megawatt campus in Kentucky. So, I'm reading those off for a couple of reasons. Number one, on that list are some data center operators that have done this for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I believe over a 5-10 year period, when they get the power, they will deliver. There's also groups on there that have never done this before, never, and are getting into the space. And there's question marks over whether those groups will be able to perform or not. And so that's the world that we find ourselves in. And so I think with this announcement that was just made, I think it could have an impact on certainly people maybe that are on the fringe of going, hey, does it make sense to, for the last 2 years, this boom that we've had has really been just going up. Mm-hmm. So this is really the first, I think if you look at this, what it's done to the stock market and things like that, you'd call it a huge shift and kind of earthquake, because it's, adjusted values of companies. But in the long run, it's probably a good thing. Innovation. I don't think it means people use a lot less. There's technology principles that would say just because technology becomes more efficient doesn't mean they use less. It actually
increases the demand.
Yeah, it means
the deployment and the use cases and the application of it.
Yeah, they use more. So, and again, I'm no AI expert. I know it's going to be hard for y'all to believe, but I think that so I think that this has had certainly an impact on the space. But historically, if we look back over the last 10 years in the data center space, what we have seen is, our industry rewards people that have credibility, so that they've done this before, that you can look back and see projects that they've delivered, projects they've worked on. So that's one thing. One, they've got a lot of money, so they have access to a lot of capital. And then the last thing, that they can engineer solutions financially to get these deals done. And that has shifted over time. There was a data center type of deal that was done 10 years ago that's not being done today. And so I think that our industry has certainly some people that have the financial skills to understand, okay, how do you go finance something that's, $10 billion? And so these project sizes that have continued to grow, learning how to do that's been really important. I was writing something yesterday thinking about actually the thing we're going to in New York next week, like the way that data center development takes place. You have land, you have powered land. You can take that land, build powered shells. So this is, again, where you build the actual shell, and then the end user comes in and puts their own MEP gear, the gear in there. Or you have like a turnkey solution. So again, this is simple, I know, but so land, powered shell, and turnkey development. And so there's a lot of people playing along that spectrum. And
it's getting more and more granular.
That's right.
As far as like, it was PowerShell, now it's like PowerShell Plus. And the ways you can slice it have gotten just increased.
Yeah. And I think there's groups that are getting into the space trying to figure out where to play along that spectrum. And that each part of that spectrum requires, one, a certain set of expertise, two, a certain amount of money, and three, the ability to pull off getting a deal done. And so it's my belief that there's great value in having the experience and the credibility of doing these deals and moving forward. There'll be people that win that have that. Some of these new announcements that are coming out today, again, I'm not saying they won't be done, but there's, I would go look at a management team and go, hey, okay, who's behind this development, and have they ever done this before, and what's that been like? And so, we talk to different people that are getting into the space, and we're always talking about like, okay, who are you going to partner with? Because there are not 100 users that are taking down large quantities of capacity in our market. There's a select few. And if you're not able to show that group that you have the credibility to get these deals done, they will not do a deal with you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to, for the real estate investor. So I came out of the commercial real estate world. And so there's, if you think about, if you've never been in the commercial real estate world, there's different types of asset classes. You got the office market, the industrial market, the retail market, the multifamily market. And data centers has always been this like kind of stepchild, where no one's really known how to, it's like technology, but it's certainly real estate. And so,
is it infrastructure? Is it private equity?
Yeah. It's like trying to figure out how to, in the commercial real estate side of things. And so what you have is these markets historically that have been a lot more active, like the office market and maybe even the industrial market. Those people that have historically been in that market are looking at the data center space going, wait a minute, what's going on over there?
Yeah, $500 billion. I'd like to get a piece of that.
Yes. And so you have like literally when PTC ended, from Thursday to Friday, it was 24 hours. I received 4 different calls, LinkedIn messages, or whatever, from people I had known in the real estate business a long time ago that were reaching out to me going, hey, we want to get into the data center space. We want to, we want to invest in a site, or we want to do this, or we want to do that. And so there's a couple of things that tells me. Number one, the world has woken up to the data center space. Yep. And in some ways that's a good thing. We need more. We talk about it all the time at these events that we go to, and like we need more people in our space. You can't accomplish what even the ebbs and flows of our supply and demand. We will not be able to accomplish it without, more engineers, more people doing data center site selection, more people doing data center development, it can't happen. So we need more people in the space. I think from a development side of things, the people getting into the space, need to realize that this is, it's probably terrible. This is like big boy money. You have to have access to a lot of money. This is not like a small office deal in, random place that you're going to do like a one-time deal. There will be some people that make money on kind of like some one-time opportunities. But, for the people that are really in the space, they're in it for the long term. In fact, I wanted to read Raul Martinek, who's the CEO of DataBank, which is a data center operator, had a really good piece about just the recent announcement with the AI changes that have taken place. And he made a comment about, I thought this was really good. He says, 2 years ago, most folks outside our industry did not even know what a data center was. Today, it's hard not to hear the word mentioned every hour on a business channel or read about it or hear it on a great podcast like ours. He didn't say that, but I added that.
Shout out.
But he says, what has been the result? Everyone wants to be in the data center business. Every week now, it seems anyone with a piece of dirt within 2 miles of a transmission line believes their property is a perfect data center locations. And so I think that's, there's nothing wrong with trying to figure out how to play in the space. It's just kind of realizing that, most people are going to be land sellers.
Well, and I think
it's just how it is.
Even talking to like very seasoned, experienced data center developers.
Yes.
Even those groups that are the top of the chain that you think of like from an execution standpoint, even those groups are struggling with the design changes and the location changes and how to manage the power requirements that the power companies are putting on the data center developers.
Yes.
And so if you think about that as like, even those groups are struggling. What does that mean for someone who's new to the space?
Yeah, sure.
They've got to learn kind of what we call the fundamentals that have been kind of the truths of the last 10 to 15 years, all the while getting their arms around the very rapidly changing landscape across all those different metrics.
Yeah.
And so to your point, it just underscores the need for like real experience. And I think the people we've seen be the most successful kind of enter the space in the last 2 to 3 years are the ones that partner with an established operator or hire those groups into their company.
Yeah, sure.
And there's been plenty who have been really successful. That I think 2-3 years ago, we're going, well, that seems, it's hard to play here.
Yeah, sure.
And that's truer than it has ever been today.
Yep.
And so if you're in one of those groups or evaluating working with one of those groups, it just pays to have a really keen eye on kind of like, again, their track record, their expertise.
Yeah. And, never before has it been more important to like understand the market. And, I think there's been this land grab and this push to go like, hey, we can just go land and power. Like, where is it? And now you really have to be smart with some of the shifts that are happening. I mean, this week, like we talked about. So it'll probably scare off some people. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, given some of the things that are happening. And I wanted to go back to your comment on the established players and how they've been how they have worked with the utility companies. If a data center operator that has a gigawatt, 2 gigawatts, 4 gigawatts under operation with major power companies across the United States are having challenges when the power companies commit to something with them and then it gets adjusted along the way. If they're having issues with that, I promise, if you're coming into the space for the first time, if you think you have access to 300 megawatts of power, 100 megawatts of power, 500 megawatts of power.
You better read those T's and C's real carefully.
That's right. You just got to be aware. And that's where I think you will see some people that get bounced out of the space because their investment time or their power delivery timeline changes, which changes the investment thesis. And so there's probably some opportunities that will come up along the way for those that are in it for the long game. If anything, what I think our time at PTC and the last week has shown is that there's exciting days ahead in our space, and I think that this is really the first, I'd say significant blip we've seen in the last year or two related to demand shifts. Like we pay close attention to, hey, what are the big users saying out there? How much CapEx are they planning to spend this next year on data center development? So, and the messages have been exceedingly positive over the last, year or 2 years. So one, it'll be interesting to see how that shifts. Two, I think the supply will continue to position itself to like receive the demand. Like I said, I think in the long term, this will, what's taking place in the last week obviously has impacted things, but, I don't think any of us are scared off by that. And it relates to like what the opportunity is in the space, certainly what the opportunity is in the US. I mean, we're seeing AI growth in other areas, but not like we have seen it in the US. And there's, reasons for that, but I think if anything, it just points to the exciting times right now that we're in and how, the opportunities that creates for people. And so it creates an opportunity on the development side, on the engineering side, on the operational side. And, let's watch in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, the groups that have said they've got access to power and will deliver the power. Let's watch them do that, because I think that's a really important, part of this process, is that the data center operators and suppliers in the space, when they say, hey, we can deliver the, 50 megs in this bridging solution or whatever, and then over the next 2 years, 200 megs or whatever it is, that they're able to do that. And that's a really important part of it.
Yeah, I think that the word that was thrown out a lot is frothy, in that you take 10,
we threw that word
let's call it 10 new companies.
Yep.
They were set up in the last couple of years. They're developing data centers. Like 5 may be successful, 3 may be kind of what maybe partially successful, 2 may not be.
Yes.
And that just creates a lot of dynamicism. Is that a word? Where the established operators are almost having to react to some of these new announcements, kind of defend their position.
Yeah, sure.
But let's talk specifically, among all those changes, one of them is really design changes around air cooling versus liquid cooling, density changes. And that was really interesting to talk to folks at PTC about that, and just kind of it's still pretty wide, where there's different levels of liquid cooling being deployed. If you look at a whole day, call 100 megawatt data center, is it going to be 60-40? Is it going to be 80-20? In fact, we talked to one operator that they said they've designed an entire building to accommodate air and liquid, which comes at an extremely high cost.
Sure.
But it underscores the end user's desire to have flexibility in the ultimate use of the building, and they may not know exactly what it's going to be in 2 to 3 years when the building is delivered. But that is the desire right now, is flexibility or fungibility.
Gosh, man, we are giving you...
I'm a buzzword machine today. But that has all sorts of implications around the lease structure and the cost of the building and the SLAs. So talk about some of the things you heard that were interesting specifically around how groups are accommodating for that changing design.
Yeah, it is changing, and that has an impact on the timing. I think watching... one takeaway is that it doesn't seem like anyone has got it figured out yet related to the exact design or how they're going to do things. And that's pretty normal, right? They're learning how to do this. And as they maybe take one design and start to use it, they realize, hey, there's more efficient ways to do this, and we're going to change it moving forward. So I think that's one thing is it doesn't seem like anyone's really cornered the market on exactly the design they're going to use. Number two, when those designs happen along the way, it changes the delivery of the product. It changes the cost. It changes things like SLAs. So there's a lot of impacts to that. And I think the data center operators are working to figure out, hey, how can we accommodate the changes, but also, in a way that benefits both groups. I think from our standpoint, when I think about absorption or demand, we look at pre-leases and signings of, capacity. And a lot of that has to do with, two things. One is the timing that the power can be delivered. So we're always asking our, people in the space, how far out will an end user sign a deal, so that they'll commit to that power. And so typically the amount of time is 2 years, so 24 months. There's some places where it's longer that they will, sign a deal for, and maybe some areas where it's shorter. But typically that 2 year mark. And so if we think where we are now, it's 2025, 26 into the 27 phase. And there's not a lot of new power being delivered during that time period because of all the deal signings that took place in the last year or two. So I think about how that impacts our demand, because a lot of the demand, most of the demand is pre-leases being signed. So that's one note. But also, too, the if you're working to, let's say you're about to commit to a 200 megawatt campus and you're, working the design over and over again, and maybe the design changes, that might start to push some of that out. So that could impact, some of the demand as well as it relates to when those deals actually get signed. So I definitely think that the design changes are impacting the market and will continue to until we get until those groups have a more standard design that they're basically wash, rinse, repeat, just putting in wherever it is.
Yeah, and that impact specifically around the financing side, if you're borrowing these incredible sums of money and realizing it's going to be potentially 2.5, 3 years before there's kind of income coming from
Yes.
that. I might have mentioned this on the last podcast, but I talked to a friend of mine who's kind of in finance for one of these groups. And he's like, the financial machinations are getting so complex.
Yeah.
And just understanding like you got this cash and it's like discounted out for 3 years, then get the return on it. But the patient capital, I think, is one that will sting a lot of people.
Yeah.
And to go, normally I was developing an industrial site as whatever the time frame is, and it's very clearly laid out.
Yeah.
And that's both longer and more dynamic, more fluid on the data center side. So it's just one more thing that's got to be managed like very tightly with someone who's experienced in knowing how to do it.
Yeah, totally agree.
Another thing somebody mentioned was like the expertise around liquid cooling is not super deep. And so the number of groups that have done that really well for a long period of time is not that big. And so that's like, in this person's opinion, that there's groups that kind of got to take your lumps, kind of figuring out
part of it,
how to do it. Yeah. What, again, to your point, what are the SLAs around it, and how to make sure they're not getting burned on a deal where, some of these margins are being negotiated pretty tightly.
Sure.
And if you mess up that SLA negotiation, that can have a pretty big impact.
Yeah.
Even 5, 6, 7 years down the road.
Yeah.
So it's a great time to be in the space. It's an exciting time.
Yeah.
And just watching some of these groups tackle these challenges has been really cool.
Yeah, and I'm like I said, I think in supply, demand, pricing, and trends, kind of those like that cadence. And so, watching the last week alone, like how the different things that have been communicated to the market, some of the changes in AI technology, like watching how that all will play out over the next 3 to 5 years, but in the next year. Will be really fun to watch. Yeah. And we're in it. I mean, this is
great for us.
Yes.
It's more for us to do. It's challenges for us as a company that's trying to make sense of all this.
Yeah, sure.
It's, we're having to adapt, and we're having to figure out what are the important things that people need to know and care about.
That's right.
In order to make, again, best decisions in this
space.
Best
decisions on, where to go, how much capital to deploy, what to build, all those things that are daily in the minds, I think, of our customers and clients. It's a big time to be in our market, and I'm certainly excited about the next year.
You're excited to be here, man. 22, 3-year-old David who just got into space could have never imagined. So, okay, so we're taking PTC wrap up. Thanks for your thoughts, David.
Oh, my pleasure.
Great. I would say if you have not been to PTC, it's certainly worth attending. Anyways, datacenterHawk.com for more information. If you'd love to know more about kind of what we do and how we track the market, check it out. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time.